Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this evening. My name's Jim, K1IR. Um, Live in the Boston area. I've lived here all my life. Been a ham since 1972. We're going to be talking about tower climbing. I've been tower climbing since around that time. And I'm still here. Uh, but from this presentation and from the research that I've done for it, I feel lucky. I'm going to be talking tonight about a project that I undertook about a couple years ago, and it's become something that I'm a bit passionate about. And I've found that a lot of the audiences that have heard this presentation have been kind of invigorated by it as well. It's about tower safety. I think it's a little bit of a different take on the topic than you may have seen before. So I hope you find it interesting. I will try to pace it so I get through the main content in 45 minutes or so. I'm probably going to show you 40 slides. There are probably about 150 slides that I could show. And if we ask any questions, I could delve into any piece of this in more depth as needed. So let's share the screen and get started. Okay.
We're good.
All right, let's see if I can change things. Okay. I last gave this presentation this past Saturday at the W9 DXCC convention in Chicago. It's a convention that focuses on DXers and contesters. They had contesting and DX tracks on Friday, and then Saturday was a general audience kind of track. And I gave this presentation at 2:30 in the afternoon on September 11th. I got up in the morning, I was going through my slides, and I was thinking about this. I'm going to be giving a presentation about safety, and I'm going to be talking about some of our community members who we have lost, on top of all of us thinking about September 11th. And a thought came to mind, and that thought was this: that those who got up in the morning on September 11th and ended up victims of that disaster could not have done anything different that day. There were no choices they could have made that would have made a difference. They were going about their lives doing everything that they should have done, and met this horrible fate. But here we are going to talk about some people who, with some knowledge and tools, might have been able to do something different. And the message for us is that there's an opportunity for us to make a difference in our own lives and help others in this particular area of tower safety. So I thought that was worth mentioning. So let me start with these guys. These are four amongst our community who lost their lives doing tower climbing related work during this kind of short period from 2018 2019. It turns out that there was even a fifth one, which I didn't work into the stats or into this slide, but that's another matter. I knew Paul Bittner, W0AIH, had met him many times, never operated a station or was there, but in Dayton, met him many times. And then when I heard about that, that was kind of a crushing moment. And then I heard about a local fella, Joe K1JGA in New Hampshire, who lost his life helping a friend take down a Roan 25 tower as he prepared to move to a retirement location someplace else in the country. And at that moment, I thought, boy, 2 lives lost in 9 months, 10 months. Is this a problem? Are we having a problem here? And as I started to do some research, figured things out, I found these two others, Ken Waddell and Lee Parsons, who also suffered this, tragic accident. So the question was really, after seeing 4 and 12 months, this was a wake up call for me, and I felt that it was worth doing some investigating. And I broke down this investigation into these three parts. The first was to ask the question, okay, we've had this number in this short period. Do we have a problem? Is this a long-term problem, a short-term thing? Is it out of what we could expect, out of the range of what we could expect? If we do have a problem, can we identify some of the root causes of the problem? And then finally, if we can figure out what the root causes are, is there anything we can do about it? So this presentation is pretty much broken up in that way. I can see you guys all in the gallery view, and down the bottom of the screen, usually there's a hand raising icon or something. Are there many tower climbers in our group here today? No, I don't see anybody doing our hand. Oh, there's one. There's one. There's two. All right, there's a couple. This is for you if you're a tower climber, if you own a tower that has that somebody climbs, if you or others are participating as ground crew, helping out in tower related projects, and if of course if you do that kind of work at maybe at a repeater site or anywhere else. This is, and there are a lot of us here who I think fall in those categories. So hope you'll find something interesting in the presentation. Okay. So this first question, do we have a problem? Let me describe a little bit about how we went about answering this question. I was looking for other places where there were statistics around loss of life doing some activity. And the most prevalent one is in the workforce, in the commercial world of occupational safety. All these kinds of statistics are tracked very, very, in great detail and with great regularity and with over long periods of time. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, part of the Department of Labor, creates in cooperation with OSHA, creates this thing every year that they update every year called the Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries. And they have a standard way of evaluating the rates of fatalities that happen on the job for any occupation. So they collect this data, and of course, as you probably know, if a life is lost on the job, it's a requirement that it be reported. So they have pretty high rates of reports of those kinds of accidents and fatalities. This number, 3.6, is the number of fatalities per 100,000 employees, people, full-time people, working per year, and that's across all occupations. So it includes everything from the safest desk jobs to the most dangerous jobs. Okay, so with that in mind, check out this next slide. Commercial tower climbing. A bunch of research was done into safety in commercial tower climbing about 10 years ago, 9 years ago. In 2012, there was a big push for this. When at that time it was perceived during the a heavy build out of the cell tower in the cell tower world that a lot of lives were being lost. And this is the number that came out of that: 199, almost 200 per 100,000 full-time equivalent workers. So that's a big number. And it's kind of relevant if we could figure out a way to compare our own statistics in this area to this one. Seems like this would be a good one to look at. So we did that. And the numbers aren't good. And by the way, this is based on the 4 fatalities that we had in that 1 year. We did some interesting work. I could show you, this is one of the areas I could drill down into, but we did some interesting analysis of kind of calculating the likely number of towers, amateur radio towers in the US, and then applying some numbers around the amount of hours of maintenance per year around installation of towers and maintenance of towers and taking them down. And the summary of all that rolls up into this number, and it's a big number. If we were off by a factor of 2, it would still be 400 and still be twice as bad as commercial tower climbing at its peak, at its worst. Right today, that commercial tower climbing number is way down from this peak of 200 back in 2012. So, but that wasn't really enough for me. I wanted to look at least maybe some other kind of non-commercial kind of thing and see how we compare to that. So I picked skydiving. All right. If you know skydivers, they do this stuff. People think this is a pretty risky kind of hobby, um, and and it's good to know that there are numbers around this being tracked annually. It's done by the U.S. Parachute Association. U.S. Parachute Association has standards. They track incidents, injuries, and fatalities. They do lots of things in the community, in that community. For the year that we were looking at, there were almost 3.5 million jumps done in the U.S., and of all those jumps, 13 recorded fatalities. So that's a fatality rate of one fatality in a little over 250,000 jumps. Now let's talk about tower climbing. And we kind of did an equivalent where a climb, we estimated the number of climbs and came up with a number that's much worse. 1 in 38,000. Again, here I could give you some of the background of the numbers, but again, if we were off by a factor of 2 or 4, we'd still be in much worse shape in comparison to this other skydiving activity. So the numbers turned out 4 times what we were seeing in commercial tower climbing and 7 times what we were seeing in skydiving. So we kind of reach the conclusion that these are support our conclusion that this should be a wake-up call and that we should take some next steps. Let me take a break here and see if anybody has any comments or questions just about that data. That initial, comparative kind of look at things.
Don't say anything in chat. You guys know how to raise your hand, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
Nothing in chat.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, so with that kind of sitting there and the inspiration to look further, I went to the next step, which was to gather more and real data. And here's the data. Now I'm a in my day job, I'm in the world of big data. We analyze data in the volumes of billions of records of data and look for patterns and all of that kind of stuff. Here, we're looking at a much smaller data set. And this is a data set that should scare you. Since 2003, we have seen 16 fatal incidents. And the change I was going to make just before starting the presentation was at that W9 DXCC event, I actually learned of one more. So there were 17 during this period. That one happened in 2018, and it was a solo situation where a guy was taking down a high gain high tower, and apparently the tower fell on him, crushing him while he was taking this tower down. Scary stuff. So this list is the known list plus one, and statistics and the breakdown of these accidents is what I'm going to be looking into in some of the next slides. But I also, as I discovered all of these incidents, I also came across a number of well-documented, very severe injuries that occurred along the way. And injuries are important. While I only have a little bit of information about injuries, one of the things I learned was that when OSHA does their work, they're trying to collect information on injuries as well as fatalities. And they believe, or first of all, their data shows that for every fatal fall that's reported, they get 183 injuries related, they get 183 reports of injuries for every report of a fatal fall. Okay, and they also believe or other sources also believe that most injuries go unreported into OSHA. So the message here is that probably we have a similar ratio of some sort, something like this. So for every fatal fall that we have in the amateur radio community, there is probably a much, much larger number of injuries that are occurring. And if we do our investigation right, hopefully we will not only prevent future fatalities, hopefully we'll also prevent a large number of future injuries. Okay. So here's a list, half a dozen major injuries, which I included in the data set that I'm going to analyze in the next few slides. Okay. So what you'll see is 16 fatal injuries or incidents, and these 6 that were resulted in serious injuries, for a total of 22. And we're going to break those 22 down into some very interesting categories. Okay, so the first one is to look at what type of incident or what type of accident happened while doing the work. The big one here is riding a falling tower. Okay, so this is a case where the tower falls and the climber is attached to the tower, probably wearing some kind of a belt or some kind of harness or something, but it's the tower that falls, and the injury was suffered as the tower came down. The second big category on the right is free fall. So that's 36% of the total here. And free fall is falling off the tower. So the tower's up, you're up on the tower at some height, and for some reason you can't stay engaged with the tower and come down. And then they have 2 other categories of miscellaneous injuries, one being an electrocution and other types of injuries that occurred. Okay, so there's one breakdown. The next breakdown that I did is what kind of activity, what category of activity was happening during the work that was being done on the tower. And interesting to note that almost 2/3 were during either installation or removal of the tower, and the other almost half was during maintenance, or a little more than a third during maintenance of the tower. So what's maintenance? Maintenance is climbing the tower to put up a new antenna, to change a feed line, to test something, to fix a rotator, all of those kinds of things. Installation and removal is the actual assembly of the tower or removal of it at the end of its lifetime. Okay.
I will make a comment at the end about that.
Yes, make a comment right now. Go ahead.
Put back the slide. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
You see, installation is when you have everything more or less new, but removal, it maybe need maintenance at the same time because it's already aged.
Well, that may be true, but in every one of these cases, the common element in the 13 was that the tower was being disassembled. Okay, so if it was in this category, it was tower itself. The goal of the job was to either install the tower or remove the tower. I don't know I hope I made that clear.
That's clear. Okay, that's okay. Keep going.
Okay. Okay.
I wanted to ask.
Wait. Let me. It is true that often the tower is in much worse shape during removal than it is during installation, and there's more risks during removal potentially, and we're going to talk about that, than there are during installation. Although installation can be risky as well. Okay. By the way, I invite questions during it. It's helpful to have feedback. No problem. Okay. So now, what we're looking at here is a different kind of breakdown, but in this case, I'm breaking down those 2 categories: the installation and removal types of accidents and the accidents that happen during maintenance. So check out the installation or removal. Installation or removal is the lion's share of that is riding the tower down. The climber was up the tower, attached to the tower, and the tower fell. Okay, as opposed to what happens during maintenance, it's free fall. You fall off the tower. Now this stuff sounds like, it might be kind of obvious, but it might not be. And what the underlying things and what's going on here are really interesting to look at. And what types of towers were involved? The lion's share were guide towers. Okay. Now, this is not, I'm not sure that that there's a higher propensity for accidents with guide towers or not, because I don't have data on what the overall percentages of towers that are installed in the US are amongst these different categories of self-supporting with crank up or tilt, self-supporting or guide towers. Okay, but we do know that within the sample that we have, almost 75% of the accidents occurred while working with guide towers. Next level of analysis is, can we associate a root cause with the different types of accidents that occurred? And the answer is a very clear yes. When you fall with a tower, when you're attached, there's something wrong with the tower. The tower is in a state that was unsafe to be climbed. When you fall off a tower, it's associated with personal protection equipment, a term we've heard in the context of the pandemic a lot, but it's also a very commonly used term in the world of fall safety or fall protection. But in the commercial world, there's all kinds of personal protection equipment used to prevent or mitigate falls. So when you fall off a tower, it's usually about either not having the right equipment or not using it properly. And finally, there's this other kind of miscellaneous category that we'll call unsafe maneuvers. And an unsafe maneuver we'll talk about, but as you can imagine, it's doing something probably without the right knowledge, the right tools, the right team. All of those things can contribute to an unsafe maneuver. Okay. And so finally, if we roll them up into those three categories, again, the majority, almost 50%, 45%, are the result of working on a tower, a guide tower that was in an unsafe state. The next group is using the improper equipment or not using it correctly around climbing on a tower that's, fully installed. And then finally, that unsafe maneuver. If we look at this, just going back, look at we have 18 of the 22 that are in those two big categories: unsafe guide tower and unsafe climbing technique. So if we can deal with these two things, I really believe that it's very likely that we can prevent future incidents up to 80+%. Okay. Okay. All right. This is probably a good break time. Any questions on that breakdown? Comments? Better ways to analyze this?
Hello, hello.
Okay.
No hands, no questions in text. Go ahead.
Okay. All right, great. Okay. So now let's talk about solutions to this. Given that those two problems are pretty well defined, it's quite likely that there are some good solutions that we can deploy. I just added this slide at the behest of many friends who felt that I was really leaving out one really important message, and that is, some of us climb when we just shouldn't be doing it at all, and that we should be outsourcing this work to experts. I say experts because there are non-professional experts who can help out, and there are the professionals. And by the way, there are professionals who we might not consider experts. Think about that. You want to hire a competent, capable, trained climber to do the job if you're paying for it. So this is the first thing to think about. Should you be climbing at all? Okay, if you've gotten past that and you still want to do the job and you have tools and expertise, then let's proceed. The first thing I'm going to talk about is this problem of unsafe guide towers. And notice the very careful wording here. We knowingly climb unsafe guide towers. In fact, we make them unsafe and then we climb them. All right, let's talk about how that happens. This is all, and remember that the predominant activity that causes a climber to fall with with a tower is during the installation and removal process. And by the way, one other thing I didn't show, a slide I didn't show, was about the typical heights that these things happen at. In the case of falling while attached to a tower, it usually happens on a guide tower or a tower that's supposed to be guide at 30 feet or below. And that's because during the construction of a tower, you put the base up and you put up 10 sections, and then maybe you put up another 10 sections. And a lot of people use techniques to hold that tower up during that first phase before the first set of permanent guys are attached in really, much less than adequate ways. So they'll use ropes, loosely tied ropes. There are many ways that this gets done. Or I've seen people who, if you're familiar with a pier pin base usually sits on a piece of a good solid chunk of concrete, and there's a bolt that sticks out of the concrete, and you put the base on over that bolt, and you put a nut on the thing, and there are people who have felt comfortable climbing to 10 or 20 feet with only that bolt holding the pier pin base in place. This is not a safe thing to do. You can cause some serious damage. Okay, so even when temporary, you need to put guys on the tower and guy it up so that it feels solid, rock solid, while you're doing the next steps. Okay, and this applies during takedown as well. Okay, so a very common case we have during takedown is when the climber gets down to 30 feet and maybe the base is in some kind of concrete or something, and starts to remove the guy wires and expects that it's going to be okay, just enough time to get the two remaining sections down and get off to the ground, and that can be a disaster. Okay, so the message here: always guide the tower properly, even when you're in this transition mode of just getting the first few sections up or the last few sections down. Don't use regular rope. Use wire rope. Connect the guy wires to the tower correctly and to the anchors correctly, and tension the thing up as if it's going to be permanent. So when you're on that tower, even when there's only a few feet left, it feels like it could stay that way for the long term. Okay. This series of slides of pictures shows how we did a takedown about a year ago for a guy who was removing a tower. There was about 40 or 50 feet left. It was originally like a 90-foot tower, and you can see that there was a set of guy wires up there somewhere in the middle of the top section. In this case, the concrete, the base section was embedded in the concrete at the bottom. Okay. So what did we do? First thing we did was we put in a set of temporary guys. It was easy to find temporary guys at this point because we had already taken off 2 sets of guys above. So we had plenty of guying material, good solid guying material to work with. So we attached them at the top of section C. Then we moved the guys that were up on top on A down to the middle of D, somewhere around D. Okay, so now think about it. This 40, 50-foot tower is now guyed with 2 sets of guy wires. It's way over guyed. What do we do next? We could remove sections A and B because the guys, those 2 sets of guys, are below both of those sections. So those both come off. We removed the temporary guys that were first moved down, and we still have 1 set of guys in place. So that gets removed. Then we got off the tower completely, and we released the temporary guys at the anchors, and we actually went to the base of this tower and cut the legs and tipped the tower over. Okay. So you can see there was never a time when anybody was on this tower when it wasn't properly guyed. And you can imagine doing this in the reverse order on installation. Okay. That process, that process takes a little extra time, but not a lot. But it's a whole lot better than just stringing some ropes, and much safer. Okay. This shot on the right here is the shot at the scene of a fatality when it was kind of that description I gave earlier of the pier pin base. The guy was installing a new tower, had that base, very minimally connected at the bottom, and he climbed to about 20 feet to try to install the first set of guys and was unsuccessful. The tower came over and he got crushed under the tower. There are other. This was the message of the slide is about the base. He trusted the base, which he should not have done. Here are some other pictures that might lead you to believe that trusting bases is not such a good idea. And here we're getting back to that concept that an old tower that you don't know a lot about is particularly suspect of having a faulty base situation. So here's one where the base was embedded in the ground, and you can see all this corrosion, which was not visible until you excavated away around the base and looked at what's going on here. We have seen examples of exactly this kind of failure that has caused very severe injuries and fatalities. Here's another one. I mean, you just look at these and you don't know what's going on with these bases, and you simply don't want to trust them. You want to do the guying as I described earlier.
There's a question in the chat about guying.
Go ahead.
Would 3 trucks/cars with class 2 hitches, come-alongs and wire rope work from your POV as temporary guy systems?
Say the first part again. With what?
3 trucks or cars that have class 2 hitches, come-alongs and wire rope.
Okay.
Work from your point of view as a temporary guy system.
If they have, my gut feel on it is if you can tension the guys up to what they should be, and you can use a loose guy tension gauge, and you feel that that's solid. If you're at full tension, you're probably okay. Now, some of you will probably disagree with me. It's not official, it's not concrete, but if you're at full tension and that vehicle is not going anywhere, it's probably going to work.
Okay, thank you. Back to that.
Okay. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that was the topic of trusting bases and guying properly and not falling with the tower.
Someone else has the hand raised before you go on.
All right, sorry.
Marty has his hand raised. Marty, go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Marty?
Marty? And he's not muted.
Nope.
Okay, we can get back to Marty.
Okay.
All right. So next topic. Oh, Marty? He disappeared.
Yep.
Okay. So the next topic is the problem of free fall. And what's free fall associated with? It's associated with free climbing. Now, this is what most people think of as free climbing. Okay, so this fellow has gone up to about 15, 20 feet. He's using his arm to hold himself in place. His buddies are encouraging him. all the wrong stuff is happening. At this point, I could also quote some statistics that are really interesting. I've seen some charts of generated from data captured in emergency rooms, where the severity of injuries was tracked versus the height of the fall, the height from which the victim fell. And it's interesting to note that the chances of the fall being fatal increased dramatically just a bit above about 18 feet. Okay, so you don't have to go very high to generate the downward force of from falling that's sufficient to cause a fatal injury. All right, so that was an interesting point. So this guy, if he fell, could be very severe. Okay, now I mentioned that this is what most people think of as free climbing, but in the commercial world, it's defined a whole lot differently than that. Free climbing, you have done a free climb on a tower if you were not 100% attached during the entire climb. From the moment you set foot on the tower, throughout the entire job, while you're repositioning yourself on the tower and descending off the tower and getting your feet back on the ground, if you are not attached securely to the tower during that entire time, then you have free climbed. Okay, and this is all defined by the the people who do standards, OSHA and ANSI, and they use those standards to allow manufacturers to build compliant climbing equipment, so that you can observe this rule of being 100% attached. I'm going to talk more about what it takes to be 100% attached. And here are some pictures of hams in the act of climbing. These all came down off the internet. They were freely posted. So this fellow just has a simple belt around his waist and a lanyard that goes around the tower. Not possible for him to have been 100% attached throughout this climb. Here's a guy who has no belt. He's just scampered up this crank up to probably to 20 feet to help loosen up this feed line or something. This and the next picture should look awfully familiar. We can guess what the event was. And this picture as well. So we got a couple of people up on these towers with limited fall protection gear. The guy on the left has none. The guy on the right has this lanyard that he's swinging around trying to figure out how to attach it. I find the left-hand one slightly comforting because the two people in the lower left corner are at least looking up at the guy to see if he's okay. On the right, nobody's even looking up there. He's up there and who knows what's going on. This guy is wearing a proper harness. He's also wearing a proper helmet and some gloves. However, he only has the positioning lanyard going around the tower. It's not possible for him to have done 100% attached. This guy is strong arming a Yagi up the tower. And then there's this guy. This is me about 20 years ago on the top of my old Roan 25 tower. We were installing a 20-meter Yagi. And I was wearing the belt that I was comfortable with at that time, which was a waist only belt, but it has some thigh straps you can see that go around. But this is definitely not 100% attached. Okay, so let's talk about this concept of 100% attached. You can't do 100% attached without the right gear. You got to have a way to be attached, even when you're doing some clever different types of maneuvers that you have to do on the tower. So you got to have the right stuff. The idea of fall arrest is another part of the equation, which is so 100% attach is prevention of falls. So it can prevent falls, but you can still fall. You can still fall as far as the lanyards that you're using will let you fall. And if you do fall, there are some features of the lanyards that can help mitigate the severity of the injuries that you might have when you do fall. And so on the right, I talk about the full body harness, dual fall arrest lanyard, and the bullet there that says 100% attach is not a guideline. It's a non-negotiable requirement. One of the things that you see in reports, injury and fatality reports in the commercial world, is the term while the climber was in transition. So in transition means they were not, secured in at a particular spot on the tower doing some work. They were moving. They were moving from one spot on the tower to another, climbing around something. And these are the moments when you have the equipment, you have to move stuff around, and you might make a mistake. Okay, it's those moments that you have to be particularly careful about. Okay, now I was going to do a demo. So let's do that. I hope you're going to hear me okay. I'm going to be a little bit away from the microphone. I'm going to switch cameras. Can you see me here?
You're good?
I'm going to tip this down a little bit. Okay. All right, I'm going to show you some stuff.
You should unshare the screen.
Oh, yes, I will unshare the screen. Thank you. Good plan.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Who recognizes this thing? Okay. It's a lineman's belt.
I thought they outlawed leather.
When do you think this thing was invented?
Probably about
In the
1850.
40s?
Yep. Who
40s.
said right after the Civil War? At the time of electrical power distribution
And
by
telegraph.
wires. Okay. I used to tell people that this kind of a belt was not legal anymore. It is still legal for limited uses in pole climbing situations. So your the person who comes to install your FiOS or your cable TV or whatever and has to work with a pole is trained to first use a bucket, and they will use a bucket almost 99% of the time. But there are situations when this thing is available in the truck, and they'll use it for climbing the pole. Okay, so I was corrected on that by somebody who's in the industry, so I wanted to keep that clear. But this thing evolved over the years, and for tower climbing, it is definitely no longer a permitted device. It was updated by being constructed with more reliably produced materials. So the nylon webbing type of material, ballistic nylon became the standard. It's much more reliable over time. And what else? Let's see. I got another thing. this is the other piece of that device, right? So this is the positioning lanyard. And the two D-rings that are on the side that are on your waist, out here somewhere, you would connect this and it would go around whatever it is you're climbing. But whenever you needed to move, if you needed to go around some guy wires or some other antenna mount or something like that, you would have to unclip one of these, climb up, and then reattach this thing after you get above the obstruction. You have now violated the 100% attach rule. Other things that have occurred with those belts were people who fell and the belt wasn't tight enough around the waist, or their body shape allowed slipping, and people have fallen out of those belts, or or worse, other kinds of problems. Okay, all right. What I want to do now is show you what current equipment looks like. Okay, this thing here is a very standard climbing harness built by a company called DBI Sala, which is now owned by 3M. And you'll see that it's called a full body harness. And it has these shoulder straps that go over your shoulders. It has a D-ring in the back. It has straps that go down past your waist, and they go to straps that get tied around your thigh. Okay, so this thing goes around the thigh, and if you fall, you are attached using a special lanyard that I'm going to show you in a second, which is attached up top here. And by being up top in the back, when you fall, you're guaranteed to fall with your head up and most of the weight being captured by those straps around your thighs. This waist belt part is actually not part of the fall arrest. It's really not part of the safety design of this harness. It's really for positioning and for comfort, and for being able to put you in good position for working on the tower. What else here? This is the D-ring that's at your waist, one on each side. This is the thing that lets you do 100% attach. This is the secret to 100% attach in this type of climbing outfit. This hook goes to that D-ring on your back here. And these two hooks are used for climbing. So you attach one and you are attached. You climb up a couple of rungs and you attach another one. Then you remove this. And so you can alternate and climb as far as you want. As long as one of these is attached, you are 100% attached. So this is the secret to that. Now, if one were to fall, this particular this particular lanyard has some stitching inside that will tear, and it'll tear at a relatively slow rate, and it will decelerate your fall. So you fall, you might fall 5 or 6 feet even, and boy, you can build up some speed and force very quickly after falling 5 or 6 feet. But this will tear inside, and it will, as I said, decelerate the fall so that you stop slightly more smoothly than you would if it was just a straight piece of rope. And for positioning on the tower, this is a kind of a modern positioning lanyard. It's attached fixed on one of these D-rings, and then goes around the tower. This particular one has a kind of a cool feature where I can grab this and open it up, and I can adjust the I can adjust this length while I'm up on the tower, and that allows me to either lean further back or be closer up to where I'm working on the tower. Okay, so that's all the pieces I wanted to show you in the demo. Let me switch back to share. Any questions about that stuff? Okay, if not, let's go back here. Now I'm going to show you this stuff in use. At this point here, the camera is at about 60 feet looking at my tower, and we got this 20-meter Yagi on a side mount, and we have guy wires here. And you can see that I am currently below that obstruction. I've got the positioning lanyard on, and I've got the dual fall arrest lanyard. You can't see, but it's also connected. One is connected right near me at my waist, and the other one is connected somewhere behind in the back of the tower. So let's watch this. So I'm climbing. Now, first thing I'm going to do is move one leg of the dual fall arrest up. Now I am probably going to disconnect the positioning lanyard. So that's now hanging down. I'm not relying on that at all. And climb up a couple of rungs. And move the other leg. So be on the far leg of the tower, I'm moving that leg of the fall arrest lanyard up. And this is enough to get up above, probably. Okay, and now at this point, I can reattach the positioning lanyard. Okay, so that's the discussion of 100% attach. I'm just looking at the time. Oh boy, we got to go faster. There are other ways to do 100% attach. There's a system called Tough Tug, which I can show you real quick. Tough Tug is a cable, a taut, tightly tensioned cable that goes up the side of the tower from bottom to top. Here it's attached at the bottom. Here it's attached at the top. And there's a special device that clamps onto that cable that you go up and down the tower with. And as long as this device is attached to the cable, you're not going anywhere. Okay, so you can use that when you have large sections of the tower that you want to climb without those different obstructions. When you get to an obstruction, you got to attach yourself somehow, get over the obstruction, and reattach this device to the cable, and then you could continue your climb. Okay. Questions about the lanyards, the belts, the harnesses, anything on that? Okay. Unsafe maneuvers. This is a smorgasbord of different opportunities for bad things to happen. This first one, this is an example. This is a situation where several people were on the ground putting up a kind of a mast, probably with a VHF vertical or some such thing on top. And all they were attempting to do was raise this thing to vertical, and then they were planning to attach it to the side of the house. A couple people were on the ground. One was up on the roof waiting for them to tip it up, and he was going to grab it, pull it into place, and then somebody was going to attach the thing. Well, unfortunately, this thing got away from them, and it fell on high voltage power lines, and they were all holding on to this thing, and 3 people lost their lives. Here's another example. Again, unsafe maneuver. In this case, this was in the Pacific Northwest. The work that was being done was removal of a huge 40-meter Yagi. I think it was a big 4-element, full-size 40, 325 pounds on a 100-foot guide tower. I think it was Roan 45 or 55 tower. One person was up on the tower, and there was some ground crew, and the tools, as I understood it from looking into the situation, were pretty limited for this size of an antenna. Well, this did not go well. The antenna got out of control. It fell, and a 325-pound antenna falling on the upper guy wire disconnected the guy wire somehow, and the tower crumpled, and the guy came down with the tower. Okay, so what do we want to say about this? I think it's pretty clear. You got to know your limits. You got to over budget on everything when you take on a job. You want more people than you need. You want more time than you think you'll need, and you want the best tools you can find to do the job. And the know-how is critical. The last bullet on this slide is kind of that same message as the stop sign earlier. There are jobs that you may think you can do, and you may get out there and start to realize, even at the last minute, that things aren't going to come together, or you may have a gut feel that that it's not the right thing to do. You should stop. You should just stop and walk away and rethink it. Okay. I hope I'm going to be able to get the audio to come through on this. This is a fellow I met after doing this presentation for Ham Nation a year ago. His name is Dennis Cornell, and he had quite an experience. I'm going to put this microphone near my speaker, and because I don't think we have audio. Do we have audio coming through from the presentation? I'm not sure.
I think so.
All right, let's see what happens here. That is not playing. All right, since we're running late, I'm going to skip that and move on. Basically, what Dennis tells a story of how he was doing a tower takedown of his own tower. He was in his own backyard. He didn't tell anybody he was doing this work. He got the tower down to 30 feet, and he did what he said he had never done before. He had put up and taken down many towers before. He pulled guy wires off while he was at 30 feet. He felt that it was going to be safe enough and the base would hold it up. Well, it didn't. The tower came down with him on it. He hit an old tree trunk, and he had very severe injuries. He was stuck there for quite some time. He's had permanent injuries, and the message that he sends is, you got to guide the tower while you're taking it down, and you really want people around when you're doing this kind of work. Doing this kind of work alone just isn't the smart thing to do. Okay. All right. Now, so we covered the problem of poorly guided towers during installation and takedown, and we covered the issue of avoiding falling from a tower. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is just, we've talked about it. Now, what can we do about this? All right. And first, I can talk about at the individual level. You got to basically make some commitments to yourself. First, that being safe is a choice that you need to make. Second is, you got to put yourself, every time you do this, in the right mindset, thinking about safety as a high priority during the whole job. And I talk about a commitment. You got to do this for the long term. It's for every job you do, whether it's your own or when you're visiting a friend. By the way, this weekend I've been asked to come over and help take down 110 feet of Roan 45. I told my friend who extended this kind invitation that I will, but we all have to follow 100% attach. And I knew that some of the people involved might require some encouragement to do that. So I'm committed to this, and I try to spread the word as best I can. Here, you saw the picture earlier of me up on the Roan 25. Well, this is what I look like now on the right. the tower has grown from 25 to 45, and I'm standing on a tick ring, and that's a 40-meter 4-element 40 on the tick ring. So I made this choice. I invested in the equipment to do it. It wasn't that expensive, about $500 worth of gear. But I also admitted to myself that it's harder to do the climbing. So this is something that people complain about. Free climbing is pretty easy. You just zip up and down. You don't have to put equipment on and off. You don't have to move these hooks around. Well, part of the decision is the commitment to do those things and accept the fact that it's going to take you some more time. Okay. Getting back to that conversation with friends, it's okay. Even if you've been doing this kind of work for many years and feel that you've been successful, you've also been lucky, and it's okay to change. That's my message to all of us. At the community level, we have climbers in all the different pockets of our community, worldwide, in all kinds of different geography, in all the different parts of our community by interest group. We have people in clubs, people who are not affiliated with clubs, all kinds of things. We need to get past all of that and get to all of these people somehow or other. We need to create awareness through engagement. We need to educate people with the practices that work, and we need to enable them with the tools to get these jobs done safely. I and some friends who felt strongly about this when we first got started created this concept of the Zero Falls Alliance. The idea is to bring individuals who can both bring expertise and be mentored around this stuff to this community, to take advantage of the power we have in clubs and membership organizations and partners in industry to help solve this problem. We created a website. It's called zerofalls.org. And inside this website, you'll find a way to sign up, get information. We ask you to kind of take this pledge to get you in the mood. I'm going to sign up, but I'm going to start thinking about these things, thinking ahead, thinking about safety as a high priority, etc. Once you're in, there are different categories of information and resources that you can have access to. And one of the things I mentioned was partnership with industry. We did a deal with a company called GME Supply. They are the largest supplier of fall protection equipment in the US. They also have an international presence. And we created these packages, kind of a low-end package, a high-end package. They're both equally safe, but the high-end package is a little more comfort and features and things like that. You can see that information on the website. The team that put this together includes some people you may know here, some you may not. Some come from positions of expertise on safety in the commercial world, both in towers and other industries. And we have a NASA flight surgeon who helped me with some of the epidemiology work that we did in, capturing the numbers here. A good crew, and this keeps growing. We also have the involvement of some clubs, membership organizations who have committed to give a presentation on this topic every so often to their members. They've contributed a little money, just general support. Key takeaways. I think you already know them. I've pounded them in throughout the presentation. We clearly have a problem that we need to address. It's to address most of the problem, a huge portion, we just need to address these two things: climbing an unsafely guided tower and free climbing. And to do that, we need to make sure bases are solid and they're guided properly, and that you apply the 100% attach rule. And then finally, that last message, we got to get the message out. I'm happy to share this presentation with anybody. You can hack away at it, cut it up, use it any way you want, but I can't give this presentation to every single ham in the US. We'd love to have your help by going back to your own clubs and getting this message out to your peers and colleagues who may have a chance to be involved in these situations. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
There is a question in the chat.
Right. So here's a fellow. This is Marty, NN1C, and he has a message. Let me see if I can get this one to play.
Hi, I'm Marty, NN1C, ZF2L. I took the pledge. Be safe, stay safe. Check out Zero Falls and take the pledge.
Okay. That's it. Let's have a little discussion. Questions.
There's a question in the chat from Ray. Is there, if there is an aspiring ham wishing to do climbing, is there any formal training or certification available?
Great. That is a fabulous question. And the answer is, for hams, I'm not aware of any. There are training courses that are awfully expensive for commercial climbers. They can get certified and all that. This company that I mentioned, GME Supply, has a whole training division. And I've been in some discussions with them about what we might be able to do to create some kind of training that would work for them, that they could, make money on somehow, but would still be affordable for our community. And it needs to have the content that's right for what we do. It's not, we don't put up cell towers. We don't generally climb those big monopoles. We have different needs. So we'd have to do some custom work and create some content that's right for us. And we were also thinking about different kinds of training for different levels of people who interact with these situations. So there might be a ground crew training course, and then there might be a climber training course. We were thinking about doing things like this in large group settings at large ham fests. Perhaps we could do them in large groups and thereby drive some of the costs down. Great question, though.
Is
Okay.
that right in the chat, Dan? You want to do the hands?
Yeah, Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that one where the people were electrocuted. One of the factors involving that, wasn't that pretty close to dark or just after dusk? And that was one of the mitigating factors.
I think you may be right. This one, I believe, was in Florida. Are you aware of that same incident?
Yes, this is one I'm talking about.
Yep. I think that's right. Usually disasters aren't just one thing. They are, the confluence of a number of factors, bad decisions, wrong equipment. It usually isn't just one small thing that makes the difference.
Okay.
Who else? Dennis. We got a Dennis.
Well, thank you, Jim. First off, I want to thank you for coming and doing this for Rat Pack. This is a wonderful presentation. But I wanted to give you some anecdotal stories. If you're looking for other tower accidents, I have one that I wanted to share with you. You don't have to be climbing a tower to have a serious accident that can result in a fatality. One of my good friends, and I don't know if you've heard this story, this was right before COVID started. He was doing some tower work. He was putting up a brand new tower. He was up on a ladder, just a step ladder, doing some welding on the raising fixture for his tower. He was not wearing the proper equipment. In other words, he's doing welding. He doesn't have a leather jacket on. He's wearing a rayon shirt. The shirt caught fire. He received third-degree burns over most of his body and subsequently, about 3 months later, passed away. And, it was such a preventable accident. Like the things you've been talking about are so preventable. Had he been wearing the proper equipment, he would probably still be with us today.
Yep.
And it's very, very sad. He was a good guy, good friend, and one of my fellow. Sorry.
Honestly, do me a favor. Shoot me an email.
I will do that.
with
yes.
that, just a short description, and I will add it. I mean, this is the way some of this stuff happens or comes out.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that people would commonly not even think about, and wearing the proper equipment, doing welding. My own personal experience, you don't have to have a tower up in the air. It can be on the ground and you can still get a pretty severe injury. Thankfully, I still have my right hand, but we were moving, and this is what happens if you're doing, you got to know your limitations, what you were saying, know your limits. It was a hot day. We were getting tired. We'd moved a pile of towers. It was from an estate, a silent key estate. We were relocating the towers, and we were down to the last couple of towers that were on a flatbed trailer. And one of those is now in the air here. I will tell you, it is up. It's the tower. The tower made it through it all. I made it through it all, but not without a serious injury. We basically were sliding the towers off the flatbed trailer, and these are crank-up towers. This particular one was a DX555 US tower. And unbeknownst to us, there was a bolt sticking up from the bed of the flatbed trailer. And the top section of the tower got hung up on that bolt. And I happened to have my hands on the tower pulling it when the tower decided to slide apart. Now, lesson learned for me. I learned my lesson. If we're going to move a tower like that, I'm going to use a strap, a web strap, to lock the tower so it can't move. I do the same thing when I do tower work here now. If the tower's down, I don't climb. I haven't climbed since I was in high school. I had an experience in high school that cured me of tower climbing. but that's another story. But yeah, I basically smashed my hand between the two of the rungs on the two sections of the tower, crushed my hand. And the thing that's interesting is it took me a while. There was no permanent damage, no nerve damage. There was a little bit of broken skin. I was wearing gloves, of course. And that was like 2.5 years ago. And I'm finally getting use of my hand back to where it was before. But one of my fingers is bent from that. But, wow. It's like, that's something you don't think about. Towers, it's practically on the ground. It's a crank-up tower. Crank-up tower isn't going to collapse on the ground. But rather, it expanded with me holding onto it. So
yep,
it's a drag.
Thank you for sharing.
I wanted to share that. I'm not proud of that moment, but I'm willing to share that just so people are aware of it. I mean, it's safety is all. Yep. So again, thank you for being here for us tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. A lot of great information, and I'll send it back over to Dan.
Okay, we got about 3 more hands. We're running long on time, so let's try to keep it short if we can. Jack, go ahead.
Thank you. A very good presentation. I enjoyed it very much. One thing you didn't mention that I'm always adamant about, my ground crew always has hard hats on. I'm very careful and very tight-fisted with my tools and things, but they can drop. And so nobody comes anywhere as near my tower that I'm working on as a ground crew unless they have a hard hat on.
That's a policy here as well. I have extras that I hand out.
All right, good stuff here. Bill, do you got something for us?
Just a question. Please post the website again that was referenced.
zerofalls.org.
Can you put that into chat, please?
Sure.
Okay, Tom, W3TDH.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Great. I volunteered in fire and rescue when I retired from electrical work. I got out of fire and rescue, running up and down stairs, carrying 150 pounds and wearing 100 pounds of gear is a kid's game, not for old men. But I did 3 responses to climbing accidents during 45 years, and 2 of them were fatal. They were fatal as we arrived on the scene. We could say discontinue the response and we will stand by for the coroner just coming up. Your electrocution accident ties right in with one of them. And people have to be aware that once things have gone wrong, very important to make sure that in their anxiety about the victim, they don't make them go a lot further wrong by an ill-advised rescue attempt.
Right.
A fella trapped on a partially collapsed tower is not going to be helped by adding weight to the tower of frantic climbers who think they can do a pole top rescue. That's just never going to work out well.
Yep.
The tower's been shocked as a minimum, physically, I don't mean electrically. It's been really stressed by whatever went on. And now you're going to add weight and unknown torsional forces to it. Don't do that. And the other thing is, I wanted to ask, are you familiar with the tethered rope system that the electrical companies are using now, where they reach above them and snap in a hook 20 feet above with an extension pole? And there's a sandbag, not a big one, a very lightweight one, that keeps it falling through that device you showed, the grab. So that thing's always above them, and they're always on their isolating strap, or they're on that rope. And it's a dynamic rope, and it also has a fall absorber in the attachment. So it's two ways of lessening the shock. But it's a very simple thing, and as long as you're willing to buy the parts and go to a one-day class, the manufacturer will certify you in the use of that. It's one of the safest things I've seen that can restore some speed to the operation, because you don't have to change your attachment points as you climb. It's constant, as long as you remember to stop at the 20-foot intervals and or whatever it is you've got, and move the safety hook up. The other thing that can work very well is a self-locking halyard. We all have halyards on our towers to hold wire antennas up and things. If you use one of these self-locking halyards, and you can look them up on various sites, the halyard, when it takes something up to the top, locks when you get there, and will not allow the device to descend. You have to get up there and reverse a mechanism to send the device back down. Well, the device most often used by the Forest Service and others is a self-locking climbing rope that is, again, used the same way, but they always use it with a ground man or ground woman, as the case may be, so that that person can not only keep the rope feeding through the device. If anything were to go wrong, like the climber somehow dropped something into the device and caused it to go open, they can, by putting tension on the rope, by falling on it or pulling on it hard, they can arrest the fall because of the secondary device in the rope. Would normally just ride up the rope happily, but as soon as there's tension on both sides of it, the person's coming to a stop. So for what that's worth, thank you.
Yep, very good. I have a thing called an ascender, which is almost just like what you described. I use it for gear that's going up and down. We don't use it for man-rated stuff, but similar thing.
Marty,
Who else?
finally got
Marty.
his hand back up again. Go ahead, Marty.
I do. Can you hear me now?
Hear you now, yes.
All right, great. Sorry, my computer decided to switch input devices on me. First, Jim, thank you so much. I've been an apostle of this since I saw your first presentation a year or so ago. And, you know, I have been one of those who's climbed free, and I've been one of those that's used the old safety belt. And I agree that the extra time you spend is definitely worth it. So I have to run to another presentation I'm giving, but I really want to thank you for taking the time to share this with us. And as a reminder, you know, you discussed this with the YASME Foundation some time ago. We still stand ready to help when you're ready to do something. I have a couple of ideas. I'll touch base with you offline.
Okay, great. Love it. Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate everybody's time. I know we went over. I'm glad you all stayed. I think the numbers of participants is still pretty high, so I'm happy. Very good. Thanks all.
It's a good.
Thank you, Dan, for setting it all up.
It's a great presentation. Thank you very, very much. You might send me your presentation. If you can do it in PDF form, fine, but whatever you got, and so we can get it out there to folks to use afterwards too when they watch this video.
Okay.
Great presentation there. Let's look around. Do you see anything more, Barry?
Everything looks good. Everything was answered.
Okay, I don't see any.
One comment, someone said that, oh, another word he said. It's the most often word heard on a flight recorder for a crash, which is probably so true with tower climbing too. Famous
I
last
saw
word.
that. I saw that comment there. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Jim. Good job.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good night, everybody.
It's been a great job. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Appreciate
so
you
much.
doing this.
You bet.
All right. With that, I'm going to say 73s, everybody. Again, thank you very much for the great presentation, Jim. And well, look forward to seeing, well, today's Wednesday, so who's going to show up tomorrow? We'll see you then. Also, I leave this thing open afterwards. So after I sign out with this thing, you want to sign back in, you chat with, visit, feel free to do so.
One
Night,
quick
everybody.
thing, Dan.
Thank you all for coming.
If anybody wants to send me a note, K1IR, sorry, Jim at K1IR.com.
Okay,
Easy to remember.
it is, except for us old timers. Okay,
Thanks again, Jim.
thank you.
Good night.
7-3, everybody. Good night.